It's pretty much official. Ralph Warnock has won the Georgia race, and Jamarl Ossof looks like, at the very least, he has declared that he's won the race. You have many organizations, but the Associated Press hasn't necessarily called the Ossof race yet. They should be doing it soon, if not at the time of this video. These both historic wins. Under normal circumstances, there's never been a runoff election that has been won by a Democrat. And in this very specific case, you've had two runoff that are won by two Democrats. Not just that, the African-American Raphael Warnock, he's the first African-American to win that spot, and coming from Ebenezer Church. So basically, you have the first Democrat to win the Senate seat in Georgia, also the first African-American to win the Senate seat in Georgia. You have a lot of historic wins, but just as important, if not more important, at least from the standpoint of all of us, is the effect that it has on the Senate. Warnock and Ossof both providing the leads hold, which Warnock has already been declared. Ossof should be declared, if not now, probably within a few minutes, within an hour or so. This means that Democrats take the Senate. This would mean that a 50-50 tie is in the Senate, with Kamala Harris giving the tiebreaker vote. It's one of the only jobs enumerated in the Constitution for the vice president, but a big one, especially in this very specific Senate. Under normal circumstances, presidents have all sorts of powers and institutional advantages that allow them to maintain the presidency. Well, in this case, not so much. Trump lost. The number of votes that went out for Warnock and Ossof, apparently candidates Loeffler and Perdue did quite well. It's just the doors were blown off in regards to the number of votes that was brought in by Warnock and Ossof. And I want to talk about why the doors were blown off, why Perdue and Loeffler had somewhat of a hard go of it. And counterintuitively, it kind of falls at Donald Trump's doorstep. Loeffler and Perdue could have picked up the mantle and started running with it. Mitch McConnell could have picked up the mantle and started running with it. Neither of them took the hint. And because they didn't take the hint, and because the candidates weren't full-throatedly pushing for $2,000, you had a lot of people run to the polls when Joe Biden full-throatedly was endorsing these two guys, and even made note about the $2,000. If you want that $2,000, you better vote these two in so I can, as Joe Biden, president of the United States, give it to you. Now, whether or not Biden would do that or not, he probably wouldn't, because I think the people will probably forget by the time he gets in presidents, and all sorts of other things will be going on. So it's almost safe for presidents or people who are running for office to just throw out stuff like that. In this very specific case, though, it could have been one of the reasons that these guys did as well as they did, and also one of the reasons why the Republicans lost this race. Warnock, Ossof are going to Congress, and because they're going to Congress, you're going to get Joe Biden with the House, with the Senate, and with, of course, the presidency. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. I'm not going to keep this video long, but I did want to do just kind of a heads up on the win, because the win could potentially be extremely significant. It's significant in one sense that, like I said, Joe Biden takes basically the Senate, with Kamala Harris giving the tiebreaker vote. Chuck Schumer, who was thirsty for the leadership position, will be the majority leader. And this gets into the idea of, what does this mean? Meaning, if Joe Biden is not going to knock it out of the park, then what does it matter that Joe Biden is going to get the Senate? It does matter from one sense of having someone that's let me put it this way. With the likes of Joe Manchin in the Senate, the vote tally is still somewhat conservative, which means that Joe Biden would have probably worked extraordinarily well with a Mitch McConnell, but he also probably works extraordinarily well with a Chuck Schumer, especially with a Joe Manchin pulling the vote tally and pulling all the legislation to the right. Now, the question becomes, is that sufficient for the midterms? If the public is not happy, not content with what Joe Biden does, especially since he now has the House and the Senate, the public could very well give them a quote-unquote shellacking, which is in the way Obama explained it when after he passes the Affordable Care Act and all of the Democrats basically run from that act, that the public punishes them for their intransigence, for not being big. Not to mention letting Wall Street walk. Meaning Obama throwing himself, I'm the one standing between you and the pitchforks. Doesn't look well in the midterms when the public is blaming Wall Street for crashing the economy. Well, in this very specific instance, I'm making the point that these two winning and Joe Biden taking the Senate leaves expectations to the American public that Joe Biden is going to be the FDR in the way that Joe Biden was saying it. My thing is, does the public punish Joe Biden if Joe Biden doesn't use this Congress that they've bestowed upon him to effect legislation that will be in their material interests? And the fact that the public was so on board for the $2,000 gets across that the public has no issue at all with the government passing policy that looks out for the interests of that public. Why would you expect anything else? This person is struggling. Yeah, but they don't want my help. No, I guarantee you that person wants your help. When that person is out there struggling, that person has lost their job. They want your help. They need that $2,000. That person was never in a great situation after the last crash. That person is going to food banks. That person doesn't want to say anything to their neighbors, but they are struggling. That person has a job, but is still running on a hamster wheel, trying to make ends meet. I'm making the point that your world, your society is not in great straits. A part of it is, yes, but another part, not so much. I was looking at the poverty rates for Georgia. I'm always curious about this stuff because I believe that stuff has a direct effect on how people view their politicians. So this is Georgia. Nearly 4 million Georgians have filed for unemployment since the COVID-19 pandemic. Thousands of Fulton County who have received eviction notices. Fulton County. Millions of Georgians. When you go further into this, you get to see the unemployment rate for like blacks and for whites in the states. And you're seeing something where blacks have like a 30% unemployment rate. It's obscene. Whites, 8 point something percent. That's a horrible abysmal number. And you believe that people who are living in Georgia aren't going to want $2,000? They aren't going to want this belief that their senators and their people are backing and fighting for their interests? Of course they will. And the moment that you say, if you vote for this person, you have the potential of getting $2,000, but this other person doesn't believe that you deserve that $2,000, I'm telling you, the $2,000 is going to win out, especially when the president of the United States is the one that basically says it is okay, you can accept this money. Why would you expect the public to not be demoralized by senators that basically don't want to give the cash? Yeah, Donald Trump pushing for the $2,000 would have been perfectly beneficial if the Republican candidates would have also been pushing for the $2,000. They weren't. The two Democrats were. It works against the Republican interests at that point. It's very possible that Donald Trump offering the $2,000 and having Republicans reject it and seeing Mitch McConnell do everything in his power to prevent that from even coming up for a vote had deleterious effects on the ability of Loeffler and Perdue to win this race. It's a hypothesis, but I think it's a damn good one. This is Warnock. Listen to Warnock.
Thank you so very much. I come before you tonight as a proud American and as a son of Georgia. My roots are planted deeply in Georgia soil. A child who grew up in the Caton Homes housing projects of Savannah, Georgia. Number 11 out of 12 children. a proud graduate of Morehouse College, and the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, the spiritual home of Martin Luther King Jr. and Congressman John Lewis. A son of my late father, who was a pastor, a veteran, and a small businessman. And my mother, who as a teenager growing up in Waycross, Georgia, used to pick somebody else's cotton. But the other day, because this is America, the 82-year-old hands that used to pick somebody else's cotton went to the polls and picked her youngest son to be a United States Senator. So I come before you tonight as a man who knows that the improbable journey that led me to this place in this historic moment in America could only happen here.
By definition, it could only happen here just because the unique history of America. All countries have their unique history. There's nothing exceptional about it, only within the context of it's exceptional that it's specific to the country. But fair enough. You hear his point. Martin Luther King, like you said, the spiritual church of Martin Luther King. And there's something profound about the idea that the hands that picked cotton, that birthed me, went to the polls to pull the lever for her son, the son of a woman that picked cotton. That is profound. I always like to make this allegory when people say, oh, dude, that's not going to change. That's impossible. Of the two slaves sitting by with one slave basically saying this is always going to be this way, and the other one saying it's not, and the one that's saying it's always going to be this way basically saying, look around. When have you known anything different? The catch is the constant is change. The constant is change. I'm not overly familiar with gentleman's politics, Warnock's politics. I am more so interested in this idea that Joe Biden can't turn around and say Mitch McConnell was stopping me from doing X or for Y. The thing I love about these two winning is that Democrats don't have an excuse. The excuse for not passing health care, the excuse for not passing an extension of Social Security, for not eliminating student debt. And all of these things are things that are popular from the context of the country, not even just the party. No excuses. When Joe Biden goes and makes his pitch to the American public, there's going to be an ogre standing across from him. That was always going to be the case. But the question that I will ask is, did you get this accomplished? If the answer is a no, if it's health care, well, you can stop there for me. But other people may not have healthcare as a litmus test. They go down the list. Did you get this accomplished, this accomplished, this accomplished? And when you hit no for all of those items, why should you turn around and pick Joe Biden? I get that the person who's standing across from would be an ogre. Fair enough. But what excuses does Joe Biden have for not getting the ideas and the items accomplished, even if you just pick what he was saying in the primary? And he should not get a secondary vote if indeed he failed on the small modicum paucity of objectives that he set. And I got to be honest, I'm not even sure what those are outside of a public option and a Green New Deal that's not a Green New Deal. He's going to Congress. Let's talk about Ossof. Now, Ossof is trying to get in, and he's trying to take out, I believe, Loeffler. Purdue, I'm sorry. He's trying to take out Purdue. Now, these two, his race hasn't been called yet by the Associated Press, but he's up significantly enough where I'm calling it. I'm saying he's going to win it. Also, at this point, they believe that he's going to win it unless there's some other votes that these guys find in the truck somewhere. I'm going to let you hear Ossof's statement also. Again, to me, it's not the politics of the individuals that matter more. To me, it's what does it mean in the context of our current time period? We are in a period that exceeds the Great Depression. And if we're in a period that exceeds the Great Depression, you have an expectation of action to remedy and try to get to some of the root causes of our concerns and our issues. The American public should not be left in the lurch like this during something of this magnitude. And if the Democratic Party is bestowed the House, they're bestowed the Senate, and they're bestowed the presidency, and they don't do anything with being bestowed all of these things. And I'm telling you exactly what's going to happen. At the end of it, regardless of what happens, Joe Biden could eliminate or privatize Social Security, and at the end of it, they still would say, we've done this hope and change. They would still say it. So my concern is less the politics of Ossof and more of not having the excuse at the very end of what I suspect is going to be a failed presidency. He's not going to call it that. The Democrats aren't going to call it that. I call it that because my thing is, what are you trying to accomplish? And do you accomplish the thing that you're trying to accomplish? And if not, why not? Well, I suspect the why not is because ideologically they're against doing things for healthcare, doing things to eliminate Social Security, to eliminate student loan debt, doing things to expand Social Security. Ideologically, I don't believe they're for those things, regardless of the propaganda that these guys push out. So putting Ossof in, to me, it's not this thing that, yes, we've changed the world. I don't buy that at all. I just don't want the excuse. And on the off chance that Joe Biden does try to pass a climate bill, on the off chance that he does try to pass a public option, I actually want those people in the positions where those people will, at the very least, have a potential of saying, yes. I don't believe Joe Biden is even going to go that route, though. But let's hear Ossof. I let you hear Warnock. Let's hear Ossof. Ossof is the one who was screaming that the other person was running with a Klansman. He was like, she's campaigning with a Klansman. She's campaigning with a Klansman. That's Ossof. Let's hear him.
Good morning. It is with humility that I thank the people of Georgia for electing me to serve you in the United States Senate. Thank you for the confidence and trust that you have placed in me. At this moment of crisis, as COVID-19 continues to ravage our state and our country, when hundreds of thousands have lost their lives, millions have lost livelihoods, Georgia families are having difficulty putting food on the table, fearing foreclosure or eviction, having difficulty making ends meet. Let's unite now to beat this virus and rush economic relief to the people of our state and to the American people. I will work in the U.S. Senate to support a robust public health response so that we can defeat this virus, putting Georgia's own Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the lead, trusting medical expertise, doctors and scientists to bring the tools to bear, the technology to bear, the ingenuity to bear, and the resources to bear necessary to stop the spread of this virus, to defeat it and to get our daily lives back, and to rush direct economic relief to people who need help right now. This campaign has been about health and jobs and justice for the people of this state. For all.
See, I'm always dicey about stuff like that because I haven't heard one specific thing in that statement. I let him go for 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Did you hear anything specific? I'm going to rush economic relief. What does that mean? What does that mean? How much? How much? Is that cash? Are you talking about PPP loans? Most of those went to top 1% businesses. Like, what do you mean? Be specific. The things that I listen for when I'm listening to these guys speaking is or are specifics. And when I don't hear specifics, I assume they're being disingenuous or that they're basically lying. Meaning, not saying something basically means that the fudge is there for a purpose. If they were going to push for something like Medicare for all, they would just say Medicare for all. If they were going to push for Medicare with everyone with COVID-19, so the 20 million people aren't stuck with medical bills, that's assuming that many of those people haven't died. I suppose 400,000 of them have dropped dead. But I'm just trying to show the difference between posturing and this kind of political jargon that doesn't really have anything in it. It's empty. As opposed to being very specific about what you're actually pushing for and what you actually want. One thing is being very specific regarding policy. The other thing is giving these kind of flowery rhetoric where people leave not entirely knowing what you said, even though they left with a particular feeling of what you said. I don't like the feeling. I want to know exactly what the person is talking about. I have no idea what John Ossof is talking about here. I don't know if this means he's pushing for the 2,000. I don't know if this means he's for the 600 and only the 6. I have no idea what John Ossof is saying at this moment. I suppose when he was running in Georgia, he probably was saying, hey, let's get the 2,000 out. Why wouldn't you say that? That's probably in your best interest to say. Same thing with Warnock. I like specifics. Either way, it seems that these two are going to the Senate. It seems that Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is no longer the majority leader. It seems like Chuck Schumer is going to be subsuming or taking that role. And it also seems that Sanders is going to take a leadership position. I forget which segment. I want to say Health and Human Services, but it may not be that. I get the feeling something's telling me it's not that. But he's going to take a strong leadership position in one of the committees. So that's what you have this morning. Democrats take it. Republicans lose it. And what this means at this moment, we have no idea. Like, share, and subscribe. One last point. When I make this argument that you shouldn't allow people to get in office with unconditional support, meaning you shouldn't support anything or anybody unconditionally. There are always going to be deals. There's always going to be agreements that get broken when you're acting or engaging with somebody, especially in a political situation. Your engagement with a politician really does need to go along this line of leverage and whether or not that person is attending to your needs. This is why I really do believe that the policy and the push should have been very specific on Medicare for all. Does Joe Biden support it? Yay or nay? And if that answer is no, then Joe Biden needs to fail. And he needs to be extremely loud as to why he needs to fail. There's a certain brinksmanship in Democratic Party politics where they say you have nowhere else to go vote for the other guy. You need to get 30 million people to look at them and say, okay, and make it very clear that they will fail and lose if they're not willing to back America's agenda. How do you have a pandemic with nearly 400,000 people drop dead, with 20 million people, I think it's 21 million people infected, and you have to actually push and cajole and make an argument and scream and bitch and moan for Medicare for all? Why do you have to yell for that under those situations and under that environment? It should just be natural. It should be understood. The public shouldn't have to push and scream and bitch and moan and curse to try to get the political instrument to pay attention to it and do its goddamn job. And yet, here we are, screaming, bitching, and moaning about Medicare for all, something, again, that the political instrument should already attend to. It's like screaming at a dad that says, I take care of my kids. It's like, well, you should take care of your kids because they are your goddamn kids. I'm saying from the same almost point of view in the way that we engage our political space, it needs to be under this notion of no unconditional support. They get your vote when they back your interests. And that interest needs to be clear and defined and understood. And my argument is that Medicare for all should be and continue to be a litmus test. I don't give a shit who's on the other side, and your support should not be unconditional. Unconditional support gets you situations like Joe Biden, where he gets in office and he basically puts in one Wall Street, one defense creature into one position after the next, not giving a shit about any of the lefties and what they wanted. Because at the end of the day, Joe Biden didn't get elected by lefties who had conditions on his support. He got elected by lefties who were terrified of Donald Trump. I'm saying I don't care who the opposition is. Your support should not be conditional. There's always brinksmanship related to politics. Bojo, I'd be dead in a ditch before I do X. He did that. He wasn't dead in a ditch because the political situation deemed it necessary. I'm saying that us, the left, in the way that it engages with politics, should also be very clear in our objectives and be very willing to let whoever it is fail and lose if they're not willing to back, at the very least, something that should be morally and ethically backed. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. I don't know what Ossof and what Warnock are going to do when they get into that office. No idea. I don't even know. I mean, I would imagine Warnock is probably more to the left than Ossof. Ossof just gave that sugary, empty speech talking about going into Congress. What I do hope is this, though, that something, somewhere, somebody with some level of empathy, care, and concern would whisper into the ear of somebody influential to get them to actually do something of significance for the American public. Whether that's on healthcare, whether that's on education, preferably both. Preferably both. Bernie being chair of budget, there it is, budget committee, actually helped it. Right there, it's the budget committee. So I couldn't tell if it was budget or health, but I thought it was health and human services. I thought it was something else. So Sanders is bragging about taking that particular position in the Senate. It's either the budget or health. I don't remember which one. doesn't help us. It depends on who us is. It does help in the sense of creating, basically, they can't really ignore them. It has to go through them on some level, all the policies and everything else. But if you have a president that is not attentive to those needs or don't want those items that you want, if you have a Democratic Party that basically will collapse to prevent the guy from getting in office and basically play blocker, then I'm unsure how much it helps. Is it from 0 to 100? Does it have a value? The answer is yes. What that value is, I don't know. If Joe Biden wasn't president and you had somebody who was more to the left, would it matter? Probably. Does it matter now in the sense of being able to get your points out, being able to get your argument out, having eyes on you, a red line drawn around you? Yes. In that context, I do think it helps. But from the grand scheme of things, I don't know. I mean, if Pelosi isn't for something, is it going to get past Pelosi, even if Sanders wants it? If Biden isn't for something, is it going to get past Pelosi to even get to the Senate? Depending upon what the legislation is and the route that it has to go. No, having one spot in and of itself is not the end all be all. It's just one spot. By the same token, it does draw attention. It does have somewhat of a lightning rod. And people do have to, at that point, deal with you if it's going through your particular committee. I would imagine for Sanders, it's an advancement. I would imagine even for us and to get our stuff redlined, meaning where you can see it, maybe. But the ultimate value, I don't know. I don't know. All right, I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, and I'm going to say subscribe. Brent McKinney, thank you, Brent. I appreciate it. And Dave Morris, also, thank you. Guys, you may or may not see me today. It depends on how I feel. I have to go get a COVID test because I have another procedure at the end of the week. Yes, I know. I was trying to avoid the stuff in 2021, but I can't. Also, apparently, my grandmother's funeral is going to be next week on Thursday. So, I don't know what the show is going to look like entirely for every day for the next couple of weeks. After that, things will probably go back to normal. But I am probably going to be in Richmond next week for a bit. So fault lines, I'm probably going to have to take it on air, on the radio, like on the telephone, maybe 1 or 2 days. But we'll be getting back to normal. Rough week. It's going to be a rough week. Like, share, and of course, subscribe.